Gengar Conspiracy by the Siphon Corps. We all remember the first Pokémon we caught, right? Mine was a Clefairy. At first I disliked the Clefairy, but soon I began to bond with it. We became partners, me and her. We traveled all across the Kanto region together. We found new Pokémon, battled some gyms, and enjoyed the time we spent together. We were inseparable. When times got tough, we relied on our trust in each other to see us through. Our friendship seemed like it could withstand anything. After my years as a trainer, I began to work as a Pokémon professor. My main field of study was evolution, how it worked, and why it worked the way it did. I always used to bring Clefairy into the lab with me, and she would watch as I did my experiments. As time went by, Clefairy began to become more and more involved in the experiments. For instance, she would hand me the chemicals, or tools I required when I requested them. One day I decided that I would do a little test involving her. I wanted to see what would happen if I gave her 2 stones at once. So I put her inside a small containment area and gave her both a dusk stone and a moonstone to hold. As expected, the moonstone vanished and she shone a bright light as she underwent the amazing process of Pokémon evolution. After she finished evolving into a Clefable, nothing out of the ordinary happened. My heart sank as I began to feel this experiment was doomed to failure. It would be quite embarrassing if I had previously exclaimed to the other professors that I thought I was onto something when I was talking with the dual stone evolution. If this turned out as a failure, I'd be the laughingstock of the facility. It wasn't until the 5th day that I noticed something was different. The variation of Clefable's shadow. It was lacking wings and instead had large spikes protruding from its body. A few more days went by, and I noticed that the shadow was getting darker, whilst there was no change in the lighting of the room. It was on the 12th day of the experiment that it all came tumbling down. I returned to my lab after getting a coffee to discover Clefable asleep on the floor of the containment area. I went to my desk, put down my coffee, and got out my notes. I turned back to take another look at the shadow, and dropped my notes in pure terror. The shadow was rising from the floor. My jaw dropped in utter horror as it ceased to be two-dimensional and became a monster. Its once black exterior became a dark purple. A horrifying smile began to form on its face, equipped with 2 rows of deadly sharp teeth. 2 bright eyes began to form, an evil gleam in them as they locked onto me, making me freeze. Once this astounding yet horrifying metamorphosis was complete, the creature walked towards my dear Clefable and leaned towards its ear. The following events I could only describe as the shadow eating her dreams and putting nightmares in their place. I ran to the glass and pounded on it, tears in my eyes at the sight of my precious Pokémon writhing in terror at the hands of what I can only describe as the shadow. I ran to the alarm and pressed it. The facility was instantly locked down. It stood up straight, and its smile widened as it wiped its mouth mockingly. My Clefable had stopped moving, and I couldn't hold back a sob. After satisfying itself on my poor Pokemon's dreams, it rose up into the air and disappeared, brought the wall behind it. A few minutes later, other scientists and members of police rushed in. By this time, I had my darling Clefable in my arms, and was stroking her head gently. I knew this event couldn't get out. I'd lose my job, and worst of all, I'd lose Clefable if they found out what happened. An officer named Jenny looked around the room before focusing her attention on me. What happened here? Why did you press the alarm? I plastered a fake impish smile on my face. Nobody must know. Oh, nothing, officer. I was just startled by a shadow. That was Gengar Conspiracy. Final thoughts? A nice little story. It's nice to get a short but good story for a change. This one was a quick read that did its job well. It's founded on a good idea on how Gengar and Clefable have always been speculated to be related in some way, and incorporating Gengar's Dream Eater was a nice touch. As for my problems with it, other than the extremely obvious and jarring typo of brought instead of through, which was pretty bad, I don't get why the main character would do such an obviously dangerous experiment on his Pokémon right after it was explained how much he cares about the Pokémon. Other than that, though, it was a pretty good story. That's it for this Creepypasta. Tune in again next Saturday when we tackle yet another story made and sent in by the fans with ghost types. If you want to write your own story, help Pierre edit a story, or even just read the stories early, check out the description where you'll find a link to the Creepypasta section of my forum. You'll also find a link to the playlist of every Creepypasta reading I've done. If you're interested in keeping up with my blog posts, join the Facebook fan page linked below. Remember that if you want your story to be read on the show, you must stay active on your posts on the forum, as well as read the forum rules. Thank you all for watching, and until next time, sweet dreams.